Hello and welcome to Pearl Magazine. Since 1997, Hong Kong has been a part of China, but its character has always been unique from the rest of the mainland. On the Hong Kong-Shenzhen border sits a village that straddles both sides. It's a restricted area where the dividing line between Hong Kong and China is as clear as the street it sits on. It offers a glimpse of life pre-1997 that many have never imagined. A single police post sits at the entrance to this restricted area, which includes several villages. For 70 years, tourists were banned.
To many Hong Kong people, shuttlecock is mysterious. They don't know it because they have never been there.
An iron fence is all that separates Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Along Chongying Street in Sha Tau Kok Village, Hong Kong is on the left and Shenzhen is on the right. Only those with permits are allowed to come and go.
How close? Left foot in Hong Kong, the right one in mainland China. It's 1 foot, 2 sisters.
At this frontier, part of this farmland is in Hong Kong and part of it is in Shenzhen. Villagers must cross the border every day to farm.
Access only via designated route. That's isolation. This closed area basically limits our freedom in every aspect.
Hong Kong has a total of 400 hectares of closed or restricted areas, many of which are gradually being reopened.
This is the checkpoint into Sha Tau Kok. Even on public transport like buses and minibuses, police come in and check for our permits. Many border points have this rule, but I feel it's stricter here in Sha Tau Kok.
49-year-old Sang Wai Yip was born and raised in Sha Tau Kok. He's used to being checked for his permit as he comes and goes. Once he had to show it 6 times in one day. Located in New Territory's northeast, Sha Tau Kok is very close to the mainland. Due to rampant illegal goods and people smuggling, Sha Tau Kok was designated as a closed area in 1951, restricting access only to permit holders. This special status piqued people's interest into this hard-to-visit place, which has been closed for 70 years. Back in the 1980s, the government started Sha Tau Kok town planning, turning it into a self-sufficient district.
In Sha Tau Kok town, there are banks, restaurants, and small supermarkets. There's a Sha Tau Kok estate. The right one is Ying Hai Building, built a few years ago. With property prices in Hong Kong, it's a blessing to have a roof over our head.
During the Qing dynasty, Sha Tau Kok was part of Shinan County under Guangzhou's jurisdiction. In 1898, Great Britain started leasing the new territories. Sha Tau Kok was then separated into a mainland Chinese side and a Hong Kong side, ruled by 2 different governments. Over the past few decades, residents in Sha Tau Kok from both sides have been traveling freely across Chongying Street, the border street. In the 1980s, shops were everywhere. At that time, Shenzhen started allowing people from outside the village to apply for permits to visit and shop here.
In the 1980s, shops on the Hong Kong side of Chongying Street were selling mostly food, umbrellas, and other household goods to maintain shoppers. In the heydays of the 90s, the whole street was selling jewelry and goods made of gold. We bought our food from the other side. After all, prices were cheaper then.
Since the reform and opening up in the 1980s, Shenzhen's Sha Tau Kok became more prosperous. Residents and the Rural Committee on the Hong Kong side started fighting for the opening up of Sha Tau Kok on their side so that more visitors would go there to shop. In 2012, the Hong Kong government started reducing the size of the closed area from 2,800 hectares, which is the size of 140 Victoria Parks, to 400 hectares. Citing security reasons, Sha Tau Kok Town and Chung Ying Street are still closed to visitors.
This is my closed area permit. Before the pandemic, we would just show our closed area permit and ID card to the police when passing this gate.
Since the COVID-19 outbreak, barriers have been set up in the middle of Chung Ying Street so residents cannot cross over as freely as they used to.
Due to the pandemic, we can see the red board. Now we can't go to the mainland side of Chung Ying Street. Although it's closed, we still continue to supply goods to them. They sterilize them. Mainland and Hong Kong people have zero contact.
For 3 generations, Sang Wai Yip's family has been running a Chinese medicine shop in Sha Tau Kok Town. They mainly trade ginseng and dried seafood to Sha Tau Kok's mainland side. 6 years ago, Tsang got married in Shenzhen. His wife and daughter live near the mainland side. He would go home on the mainland side through this police post, the closest point on the border.
Hi. 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 Hello.
Over the past 2 years, traveling between Shenzhen and Hong Kong requires quarantine. Since Sang has to run his shop, he's been separated from his family for a long time. They can only meet through this metal gate.
Hello， 睇見未有？嚇？你知唔知喺邊度啊？你喺邊度啊？你食咗乜嘢？嚇？食咗乜嘢啊？嚇？喺沙頭角兩邊。
Among all the places connecting both sides of Sha Tau Kok, this is the closest point. Initially, I felt sad, so close yet so far. There's no other way. I have to come here to work, that's life.
Sha Tau Kok's Crooked Harbor used to provide a living for fishmongers with its abundant supply of seafood. '66-year-old Feng Siu Tai was a fisherman in the 1970s. While he managed to make a living fishing back then, Feng says the catch has dwindled over the past 20 years.
攞唔攞到魚？攞唔到啊！以前係攞辣魚嚟掹嘅呢度。
Feng says back in the day, many fish farmers set up their rafts in waters off the closed area. But as Shenzhen's economy grew, the marine ecology changed so much that it's become difficult to maintain their income farming fish in their offshore rafts.
Waterfront reclamation had the seabed dredged. The water's become shallow. It used to be very deep with a depth of some 5 to 6 people's height. Now it's only waist deep. You can keep a few sea bream in groupers for your own meals, but so few. How do I sell for a living? It's a bit difficult to afford. Where do I find work here?
There aren't a lot of private flats in Sha Tau Kok. Feng bought his property in 2001 for $1.6 million. Looking out from his rooftop is the mainland's Sha Tau Kok. He laments the vast difference of living on the 2 sides of the village.
Shenzhen is more prosperous than here. They developed residential flats everywhere. No more factories. Look, how many tall buildings are there? Do we have any here in Hong Kong Shao Tao Kok? There's none.
After being closed to outsiders for 70 years, Sha Tao Kok's population stands at about 4,000, and most are elderly people. Few shoppers come here now. Many shops are vacant. Even stalls in the wet markets are closed.
There's nothing to do here. For villagers and friends who can't come back from overseas, I sent them food from Hong Kong by post.
Sang says decades ago, many villagers, including himself, chose to make a living overseas. But many returned after not being able to adjust to life abroad.
After all, I prefer the way of life in Sha Tao Kok. Rooted in Sha Tao Kok, I need to keep this store, which is created by my grandfather and my father with their blood and sweat. The entire Sha Tao Kok, nothing has changed over the past 70 years. Everything remains the same. That's silent no vitality at all. Shouldn't we adjust to an open policy? How do we do it? If it opens up, I think it's a good thing.
When we come back, a tough hike to a previously closed village. Stay with us. Welcome back to Pearl Magazine. While the government is opening up certain restricted areas, some villages rarely see outsiders. One particular village on the border with Shenzhen is still inaccessible. Those who want to visit must either get a permit or hike through a tough trail. What is the future for rural residents here? Located in the northeastern part of the New Territories, Lin Mahang sits on the border with Shenzhen. From the 1950s onwards, this has been a closed area. In 2012, it was gradually opened to the public, but the only way into the village, a 700-meter road, remains closed. A permit is required to enter.
The village was opened, but the only road to the village is still closed. It is very inconvenient. So this opening up, we think, is a fake opening up.
Lin Mahang village head Yip Ma Ching's family has been living here for generations. Since it's just a river crossing away from Shenzhen, this place used to be a popular crossing for mainland illegal migrants.
This is the river that separates Hong Kong from the mainland. Some people climb over fence, which used to be very short.
Since the Qing dynasty, villagers here have been farming on both sides of the river. But when the New Territories was leased by the British government in 1898, Lin Mahang was separated into two parts. Villagers must cross the Shenzhen River via the International Bridge every day.
We have many relatives and siblings there. Once separated, they couldn't come to Hong Kong anymore. They were very poor. They didn't even have enough to feed themselves. We even had to give them old clothes to wear.
In the 1950s, to stop illegal migrants at the border, Hong Kong set up a closed area next to Shenzhen and erected a barbed wire fence, totally separating villagers from either side. Later, a special channel was created to allow villagers to plow the fields on opposite sides with transit permits. The Security Bureau said before the pandemic, an average of 20-plus mainlanders would cross into the closed area and 5 designated New Territories towns every day.
These two are transit permits. Within the given days, we can use them to farm on both sides via designated routes.
Half a century has gone by, and Shenzhen is a different town today. Since the reform and opening up of China, the city is now at the forefront of the country's rapid economic development. Only a few villagers bother to cross the border to farm in Hong Kong now. But Hong Kong's Lin Mahang is still the same old village from 70 years ago.
Since reform and opening up in the 1980s, they have used their land well. Look at them. They have built high-end buildings. They develop well. But our village has remained unchanged for centuries. It is not unchanged for 50 years. It is unchanged for centuries. This is my ancestral home, a rural dwelling. My mother used to use this, using firewood in her time.
Because Lin Mahang village was closed to outsiders for years, its development is stunted. Many villagers ended up making a living overseas. Yip Ma-ching studied in the UK and started a business there. Just before 1997, he decided to return to Hong Kong. 10 years ago, he retired and went back to live out his remaining days in Lin Mahang.
The land is for growing vegetables and sweet potatoes. I eat the produce I grow myself, and the excess is sold to cover costs such as fertilizer. If the younger generation can make a living in the closed area, I would want to help develop this village. That's my wish. It is the government that ignores it. It will become deserted and useless.
Just do whatever is available. That's life on fish rafts.
Some residents in the restricted area live by the sea. Since the decline of the fishing industry in the 1980s, many of these residents live in poverty. Last year, the government proposed developing the area into an ecotourism destination. A new pier at Sha Tau Kok is supposed to open in the second quarter of this year. Tours will take visitors to outlying islands on weekends and public holidays.
I am now building a boat. I am only doing this since I heard it's going to open. I do it to earn money. On my way to Crooked Island. Very soon.
While Sha Tau Kok remains a closed area, nearby places such as Crooked Island, Ap Chau, and Lai Chi Wo are not. Right now, those who wish to visit these islands must first go to Ma Lu Shu Pier in Sha Tin and take a 90-minute boat ride to get there. Feng says once the Sha Tau Kok Pier is open, he can provide charter services for the visitors.
From Sha Tau Kok, it's only a 10-minute ride. The boat can be totally loaded. For $300 to $400 per boat, you can have up to 10 people if you want. Not far away from Crooked Island is Yan Chao Tong, then Lai Chi Wo. Then next door is mainland China. From Sha Tau Kok to Yantian, it's about 10 minutes.
Sha Tau Kok is very close to Yantian in Shenzhen. The government is in talks with Shenzhen on building a Dapeng Bay Yin Chao Tong ecological and recreational tourism circle. Visitors can then travel between the two places and enjoy the natural scenery.
Hung Shek Mun is part of Yan Chao Tong. The seabed is protected. The surface is like a mirror. It's very calm. At 6:50, all stores are closed. There's nothing. Almost no place to eat, no customers.
Upon returning, the streets of Sha Tau Kok are silent. Feng Shutai hopes to see this change despite potential issues.
If it opens, crime will become worse. Open is better than not open. At least there's money. If it's still closed, it will become a dead place.
Closed areas in Hong Kong are a curiosity to many because police do not issue permits to these places easily. Some people have bypassed the closed road and the permit to reach the village by hiking over a treacherous mountain nearby.
We use entire ropes left behind by hikers, using both hands and feet. We have to slide down the slope, so this trail is pretty tough. The whole village is surrounded by barbed wire. I could feel villagers weren't having an easy time, because they must pass through this gate every day, and they must go home before midnight.
Historian Yun Shi has been studying Hong Kong closed areas for 15 years. He says many villages have been closed for more than 50 years. Many have untold historical value that he says the government should conserve.
To let the public know about the traditional social landscape and human spirit. We need to cherish them even more. In our planning, we should preserve cultural heritage that we believe is worth preserving.
Looking into the closed area, there's often something special, like these ancient monuments in Lin Mahang village. Villagers say they're looking forward to the opening up of the closed area so people can appreciate these.
Our place here and over there at Sa Tau Kok can become tourist spots. We have a huge area. It is worth a visit for Hong Kong people. So vast you can't even finish seeing in a single day. Not even within a few days.
The potential of developing these unique border towns has villagers hopeful for better days to come. If Hong Kong Shenzhen development becomes more integrated. That's Pearl Magazine this week. See you again next week. Good night.